Gilles-Smith. She's a founding principal of Ground, a landscape practice right here in the heart of Union Square.
Okay, so put this in my pocket. And is there a clicker, or just I can use? Okay. So as Shu mentioned, I'm a landscape architect. This is the location of my office in the Shefford Ferry building. Now, why I included this is, partially to place us, but as Jason just said, most of Somerville is not, and our work as landscape architects is not about parks. So much of our urban experience is really about the hard environment. Now, whether we recognize it or not, our environment is actually the product of design decisions and financial decisions. All of these things that we sort of glance over, that we take for granted, the curbs, the road, the signage, the streets, the cobble park in the middle of it, the buildings, every single piece of it, the street furniture, is a product of design decisions. And so I think, first of all, we need to recognize that there's an extreme amount of talent and investment that goes into the mundane. My mission, my goal for today is to convey the idea to expect more. So even in these hard spaces, even in these tiny little gaps that we have, expect more. And so I'm going to go through one project primarily. Partially talking about it's a little plaza project. It's not a street, although it has street aspects to it. And I know most of you are I expect most of you are pretty familiar with the design process, but I thought that it would be helpful to go through the design process as we know that we're going to be going through, many of these design exercises in the following years. This was a project, this was for Mass College of Art. It was located on a parking lot, sort of in the middle, right on Huntington Avenue, adjacent to this little road, Vancouver Street. And when we start working on projects, we just throw ideas out there. We throw them out without a lot of emotional investment. We don't keep them guarded. We want to get discourse. And we find it's actually much more productive to have things to talk about rather than sort of conveying what do you want, because everyone wants everything. So then people can start making judgments. What do I like? What don't I like? We had, public meetings, public charrettes, and then we ended up having some really strong focus meetings with the students. This was for this little area for a student residence hall, undergraduates, and you'd think that they wanted sort of green space, lawn. No, they wanted seating, and they wanted something that talked about their artistic identity. Native planting, colored lights, but it was about their personality, their identity. And there was a lot of fire trucks, ambulances, et cetera, et cetera. And the three largest branches of Boston Sewer also converged underneath this site and went somewhere else. So a lot of infrastructure to think about. You can't see the slide, so I'll skip over it. It ended up being a project about seating for individuals, seating for couples and friends, seatings for groups, and seatings, classroom-sized seating. And that's, as a landscape architect, my job is about connection, about connecting inside and outside, connecting people to nature, but really it's about connecting people to people. And I think that seems to be sort of the common goal of all of us speaking tonight. And so this was kind of we work with like super rough models, things that people feel comfortable coming to a meeting and sort of moving around, nothing really precious. And, native plant palette. You can barely see this plan, but so this was this little plaza that we did that was separated from a road from this green space. And we started thinking, okay, so great design, but we've got this road in the middle of the way. What can we do with that? These are some examples of what's called a voie neuf in other places, where roads that are primarily given away to a pedestrian more than a road, and the cars actually have to slow down instead of the pedestrians. Posted speed limits of like 15 miles an hour, and there's a couple kicking around. So we looked at a number of options for this, and then ultimately ended up up stretching the design across this road. This was also something that was a real product of collaboration between many, many stakeholders. And part of that is really, putting the time in early so that you can get buy-in, so that you're not sort of going backwards and forwards. So half of this road was owned by Wentworth, and half of this road was owned by Mass Art, but it stretched right across. And then now I'll show you some of the examples. So the students wanted something that talked about their artistic identity. It's a 21-story tower, so looking down upon it was just as important as actually being within it. These really sort of cool graphic patterns are, part of it is like there's a big star marking the entrance. The other part of it, though, is they're actually skateboard stops. They're skateboard rumble strips. So thinking, how can we do the practical in the most artful way? And then these benches that not only are providing things for groups in different sizes, but are providing seats that are going up and down so that you can lie on these things. If you're shorter, if you're taller. And then the way that with a very, very small space, you can start to get quite a lot of difference in spatial experience by layering these pieces against each other. A native planting palette, permeable pavers, so thinking both technically and artistically all of the time. The road that I mentioned, the Venurf, and so imagine if this was just asphalt running down. It would have such a different experience. And even if even if there are cars on it, it's the idea, it's mine. And then I'll just flip through. And then, lighting. Lighting again is it's functional, but it's also important as a visual experience. So the big argument for me is you have to combine the practical, but with the artistic at the same moment. Particularly in New England in the winter, so much of our lives is actually in the evening. Our experience of the landscape is a nighttime experience a lot of the times, particularly art students coming home from studio at 10, 11 o'clock at night. So thinking about that, how that can really, that sort of magical experience, both sort of safety, but really the artistry. And then, it's not always beautiful like this. And so thinking about that experience too, the winter, or as this past winter, where these lights kind of become like lanterns. And this was a big surprise to me, where seeing these big things. And then, so that's that project. And then I'm just going to flip through some slides really quickly of some other projects. We're thinking of different spaces. So thinking of a rooftop. This is on top of the Natick Mall. It's a 1.5-acre roof. But how you can do a green roof that isn't just, it's sustainable because it's sedum, but it can be artful and sustainable at the same time. Another sort of surprising location is we put these individual veggie gardens on top of a roof in the south end, so that you can kind of be bringing this kind of domestic real connection to nature, even though you're up, on the third floor. And then an art project that we did in the south end of Boston. This project was talking about the neck, the skinniest isthmus of land that used to be the way into Boston, and the transformation of land to water. So obviously the blue is water, the green is land. And finally, finally, another project. We're thinking about the sides of the walls. Paint, but also is there a way that we can make them symbols of sustainability as well? Truthfully, green walls actually aren't that sustainable. They require a lot of maintenance. So, this was a temporary installation. The magic of sustainability and the message of it, because it's actually easier to see than a really high-tech mechanical system. And again, sort of a return to the evening, into small spaces. So being opportunistic in any little patch that we can. And that's it. Sorry, that's why that slide's not going. Okay. Thanks.